The only sounds are the howling wind and the ragged gasp of my own breathing. The world is just a churning vortex of white snow, so thick you can't tell the sky from the ground. I shouldn't be out here. Every rational part of my brain is screaming it. The storm blew in way faster than the forecast predicted. A furious squall that turned a simple day hike into a desperate struggle for survival. Every single step is a monumental effort, plunging my leg knee-deep into the powder. My face is numb, my eyelashes are crusted with ice, and the temperature is dropping fast. Just get to the tree line, I keep telling myself. Just find some shelter. My entire world has shrunk to the 5 feet in front of me. Pure, disorienting white. Then, I see something else. A splash of color. A deep, impossible read against the stark white canvas. Wait. What is that? My exhausted mind can barely process it. It's just a shape, half buried, maybe 30 yards off the trail. I can barely even see. Is it a piece of cloth? A branch? But it's the color that gets me. The color of life. The color of blood. Curiosity, or maybe some primal instinct I didn't know I had in me, pulls me off my path. I fight my way toward it, the wind trying to shove me back. To keep the secret the snow is trying to bury. As I get closer, the shape starts to come into focus. It's not cloth, it's fur. A body. My heart is hammering against my ribs. I finally reach it and just fall to my knees. The cold seeps through my pants instantly, but I don't even feel it. I can only stare. It's a fox. A beautiful red fox. Her coat the color of a dying autumn leaf. She's curled into a tight ball, a dusting of fresh snow already starting to cover her like a shroud. She was alive. Barely I could just make out the faint rise and fall of her side. A wisp of steam, delicate as a spider's thread, ghosted from her nose with each shallow breath. Her eyes were open, but they were distant, glazed over with pain and exhaustion. She was so still, so surrendered to the cold. Foxes don't hibernate. They're built for this weather. For her to be like this, something was terribly wrong. She had to be sick or old, maybe already injured before the blizzard hit. My first instinct, the hiker in me, is to not interfere. Leave wildlife alone. It's the cardinal rule. But looking at her, at the sheer elegance of her form, the rules felt hollow. This storm was a death sentence. She was already gone, and she knew it. I reached out a gloved hand, slowly. Hey, I whispered, the word stolen by the wind. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. She didn't flinch. She didn't have the energy, but her dark, intelligent eyes shifted. They focused right on me. It was just for a moment, but in that moment I felt a shock of connection, a silent message that went beyond species. It wasn't fear in her gaze. It was something else, something ancient, a plea. She was breathtakingly beautiful, but she was dying. I could see it in the slow, tired blink of her eyes. I could feel it in the profound stillness of the air around her. The wilderness was claiming her, and I was just a witness. I knelt there for what felt like an eternity, holding a silent vigil in the heart of the storm. What could I possibly do? I couldn't carry her. I couldn't build a shelter. There was nothing. A deep sadness washed over me, as cold and heavy as the snow. And then it happened. With an effort that seemed to use the very last spark of her life, she moved, just a tiny tremor through her body. She lifted her head, maybe an inch, her neck trembling. Her gaze, which had been locked on mine, shifted. She looked past me with an intensity that burned through her exhaustion, fixing on a dark outcropping of rock barely visible through the swirling snow. A sound came from her throat, not a bark or a yelp. It was a low, guttural chuff, so quiet I almost thought I'd imagined it. She made the sound again, a little weaker this time, her eyes still locked on those rocks. She was trying to tell me something. The thought was impossible, a desperate human projection onto a dying animal, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling. It was like a whisper on the wind, an urgent message passed from one living being to another. Look there. Her head lowered, her last bit of strength gone. Her body gave a final, soft sigh. A puff of steam rose, and then, nothing. The faint movement in her side stopped. The light in her eyes dimmed and went out. She was gone. The wind howled, a mournful cry that just amplified the crushing emptiness of the moment. I was alone again, but everything had changed. The snow-covered ground no longer felt just hostile. It felt sacred. She had given me something. A last wish. A sacred trust. In her final moments, she hadn't tried to save herself. She had tried to tell me something. The silence she left behind was louder than the storm. The world was just wind and white, and this hollow ache in my chest. My mind was reeling. Did I imagine that? Did a dying fox really just use her last breath to point me toward a pile of rocks? It was insane. The logical part of me, the part screaming about self-preservation, told me to get up and go. My own survival was hanging by a thread. I was exhausted, disoriented, and now emotionally shattered. The smart thing to do was to forget it, to chalk it up to a strange, sad encounter and focus on saving myself. I looked down at her still form. I could just walk away. In an hour, she'd be completely buried by the snow. No one would ever know, but I would know. I would see those eyes for the rest of my life. That final, desperate gaze. It wasn't random. I was sure of it. There was a purpose in it that defied all logic. It was a mother's plea. I don't know how I knew. I just did. I felt the weight of her final thought in my bones. She had trusted me. A human, her species' greatest threat. With her last breath, she hadn't thought of herself. She had pointed, she had whispered, "Save my child." No, I said out loud, a small act of rebellion against the storm. I couldn't just leave. I couldn't let her last act be for nothing. A decision settled in my heart like a stone. It was a terrible, reckless decision. It could very well get me killed, but it was the only one I could live with numb fingers. I took off my bright orange beanie and placed it on the snow next to her, a small marker in the endless white, a promise that I'd be back, that I wouldn't let her be forgotten. Then, I stood up and turned my back on the trail, on my own safety. I faced the dark, jagged rocks. I was leaving the world of logic behind and stepping into a world of instinct, faith, and a promise made to a dying mother. The blizzard raged, trying to erase the path, trying to swallow me whole. But now, I had a compass. I had a mission. I started walking. The journey to the rocks was a battle. The wind was a physical force, a solid wall I had to push through. It tore at my clothes and clawed at my skin with icy fingers. Snow, driven sideways, stung my cheeks like 1,000 needles. My tracks were gone seconds after I made them. There was no going back, only forward. Doubt was a cold voice whispering in my ear. "You're chasing a ghost. You're a fool. You're going to die out here for a feeling." I knew the words made sense. This was the stuff of fairy tales, not real life. What if she was just having a seizure, a random death spasm? But then, the image of her eyes would flash in my mind. The clarity, the focus. It was more real than the snow swirling around me. It was my beacon. After what felt like hours, the rock formation loomed out of the white, bigger and more imposing up close. It was a jumble of massive frost-covered boulders that offered a slight break from the wind. I collapsed behind one, gasping, my lungs burning. The relative quiet was a blessing. Now what? I scanned the area, and my heart sank. It was a chaotic mess of stone and snow. Drifts were piled high against the base, some as tall as I was. A den could be anywhere, buried under feet of fresh powder. The task felt impossible. I started searching, my movements clumsy with exhaustion. I pushed snow away with my hands, peered into every dark crack, and circled every boulder. Nothing, just cold stone and endless snow. Despair set in, cold and sharp. I was wrong. I'd risked my life for nothing. I was an idiot who built a fantasy around a random, sad event. The mother fox was gone, and if there was a kit, it was surely gone, too. I slumped against a rock, the fight draining out of me. The cold I'd been keeping at bay started to seep into my bones. It would be so easy to just sit here, to just stop. And then, I got lucky. For no reason at all, the wind suddenly died down. In the shocking lull, the world fell quiet, and in that quiet, I heard it. The faintest sound imaginable. A tiny, high-pitched mewl. A weak whimper, almost too delicate to hear. My head snapped up. I held my breath, straining to listen. Was it the wind? My own ears ringing? There it was again. A little stronger this time. A sound of pure, helpless distress. It was coming from nearby. From the base of the largest boulder, from beneath a huge drift of snow. Adrenaline surged through me, a jolt of energy that banished all exhaustion. I scrambled over, my heart pounding a frantic, hopeful rhythm. I started digging with my bare hands, throwing snow behind me, my arms working like pistons. The snow was light on top but dense and heavy underneath. I dug and dug, my fingers growing numb, my muscles screaming. I didn't care. I just had to get through. I hit something soft and my heart stopped, but it was just a buried branch. I tossed it aside and kept digging. And then I saw it, a small, dark opening to a burrow, almost perfectly sealed by the storm. The sound was coming from inside. I had found it. She had led me here. She was right. My breath caught in my throat. Lying on my stomach, the icy cold soaking through my jacket, I peered into the darkness. At first, nothing, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw movement there. Huddled at the very back of the small den was a tiny ball of fur. It was so impossibly, heartbreakingly small. Its fur was dark and fuzzy, not yet the vibrant red of its mother. Its eyes were just glistening slits in its tiny face. It was shivering violently, a constant tremor shaking its fragile frame as it let out another one of those tiny whimpers. The sheer vulnerability of it hit me like a punch to the gut. This tiny creature, all alone, its only protection a hollow in the dirt, its only warmth its own fading body heat. The storm that was a challenge for me was an insurmountable monster for this kit. In that moment, I understood everything. Every ounce of the mother fox's fading energy had been focused on this, on leading me here. She hadn't died in despair. She had died with a mission. She had gambled everything on the compassion of a stranger. It was the most profound act of a mother's love I had ever witnessed. My resolve hardened. No more doubt. I carefully widened the opening, then reached my hand in, slowly, palm up. I spoke softly. "It's okay, little one. It's okay. I'm here to help." The kit was too cold and weak to be afraid. It barely reacted as my fingers gently touched its shivering body. It was so cold, shockingly cold. With extreme care, I scooped it up. It weighed almost nothing. It curled instinctively into a ball in my palm, a creature so fragile I was terrified I might break it. I pulled it out into the gray light. Without a second thought, I unzipped my winter jacket, creating a warm, dark cavern against my chest. I carefully placed the tiny fox inside, right against my fleece and my own body heat. A tiny, wild creature, nestled against a human heart. It shivered once, a violent, rattling tremor, and then, feeling the warmth, it burrowed in deeper and went still. For a terrifying second, I thought the shock had been too much. But then I felt it, a tiny, faint vibration against my ribs. It was purring, or the fox equivalent of it. A small, contented rumble from a life that had been moments from being extinguished. I zipped my jacket up, leaving a small gap for air, enclosing my precious cargo. I was its den now, its mother, its only hope. The journey back was different. The world outside my jacket was still howling chaos, but inside I was carrying a tiny beating heart. Every step felt heavier, more important. The wind still tore at me, but it felt smaller now. My focus had narrowed to the fragile life tucked against my chest. I talked to it the whole way, a quiet stream of reassurance. We're almost there. Just hang on. You're so brave. Your mom would be so proud. It was as much for me as it was for the kit. A mantra against the cold and the fear that I might still fail. Finding my cabin was a feat of memory and luck. Finally, through the swirling snow, I saw the dark shape of the roof. Relief washed over me so powerfully my knees almost buckled. Inside, I carefully unzipped my jacket. The little kit was still huddled there. The shivering was less violent, but it was still lethargic. It was alive, but only just. I knew that warming it up too quickly could be dangerous. I set up a makeshift nest in a cardboard box with my softest sweaters. I filled a couple of water bottles with warm, not hot water, wrapped them in towels and placed them in the box to create a gentle heat. Then, I gently placed the kit inside. Now came the hardest part, waiting. I sat on the floor next to the box, watching its every tiny breath. For the first hour, there was very little change. It was a terrifying, helpless feeling. I knew it needed hydration, but I also knew cow's milk is dangerous for them. I frantically searched online on my phone and found advice from wildlife rehab sites. They all said to start with an electrolyte solution. I had some in my first aid kit. After another hour, the kit's shivering had nearly stopped. It stirred. This was the moment that my hands trembled as I drew a tiny amount of the room temperature solution into an eyedropper. I carefully brought it to its lips. Come on, little one, just a little bit. It turned its head away at first. My heart sank. But I tried again, squeezing a single drop onto its mouth. It licked it off. I squeezed another. It licked that one too. Then, it latched onto the dropper, its tiny mouth working with surprising strength, suckling down the life-giving fluid. I only gave it a small amount, but it felt like the greatest victory of my life. It was fighting. Over the next few hours, a transformation began. The lethargy faded. Its eyes opened, fully dark and bright and curious. It lifted its head and really looked at me. By morning, it was a different animal. It was moving around the box, sniffing the blankets, taking wobbly, uncertain steps. Its strength was returning. I'd found a recipe online for a puppy milk replacer, a viable option for fox kits, and mixed up a small batch. When I offered it, it tentatively lapped it up, its whole body wiggling. Seeing it eat was the real turning point. It was going to make it. The next few days were a blur of warmth, feelings, and wonder. A personality began to emerge from the tiny, shivering creature I'd pulled from the snow. He was curious, playful, and utterly fearless of me. I named him Ember, for the spark of life I had so desperately tried to protect. He'd stumble out of his box and try to pounce on my shoelaces, his movements clumsy but full of a growing confidence. I was mesmerized, but I knew this couldn't last. I wasn't his mother, and my cabin wasn't his home. He was a wild animal, and he deserved a chance to live a wild life. It's the most important rule of rescue. The goal is always release. Keeping him would be selfish, and it would ultimately doom him. I made the call. I found the number for the nearest state-licensed wildlife rehabilitation center and explained the whole story. The woman on the other end was kind and professional. She praised my actions but confirmed that Ember needed expert care. He needed to be with other foxes to learn how to hunt and socialize and, most importantly, to not imprint on humans. They had other orphaned kits and were getting ready to raise them together before releasing them back into a protected area. She gave me instructions for transporting him, and we arranged for me to bring him in the next day. A part of me was heartbroken. This tiny life had become the center of my universe. But I knew it was the right thing to do. It was the final step in honoring the promise I made to his mother. Her sacrifice was for him to live, not for him to become my pet. Ember's journey back to the wild is just beginning, and it's only possible because of the incredible work of wildlife rehabilitators. They are the true heroes who give animals like him a second chance. If this story has touched you, please consider looking up and supporting your local wildlife rescue center. Every single donation helps them save lives, and please, Like this video and subscribe if you want to see an update on Ember's progress at the center. The morning I took him to the center, I went back to the ridge. I found my orange beanie, a small beacon in the now melting snow. I found her, and I buried her there, on the ridge overlooking the valley. It felt right. I will never forget her. In the face of death, in the heart of a blizzard, she didn't fight for her own life. She fought for his. She looked at a human, a creature she should have feared, and saw a glimmer of hope. She taught me that the wilderness, for all its harshness, holds a love that is fierce, powerful, and eternal. A mother's love.